Hey folks, let's talk about the top 10 Scholomance Academy cards. The very best cards from the expansion. These three didn't even make the cut. And I mean, these are all absolutely insane cards. And frankly, there were like 20 cards I could have included in this video. It was almost impossible to determine the top 10 and then rank order them within that 10 is just an act in futility. So I'm really curious what you guys think about the rankings in this video. Number one in particular, who knows what to choose. That said, before we get into it, I did want to thank our sponsor for this video. You may have noticed I'm rocking some different glasses today. That's because this video is sponsored by GMG Performance. These days, we all spend a ton of time in front of screens, whether that's playing Hearthstone, on your phone in bed, maybe chilling and watching Netflix. And typical screens these days have blue light, and blue light's not really all that good on our eyes or our brains. For me in particular, when I'm in front of a screen all day, I have a lot of trouble sleeping. It really wreaks havoc on my sleep system and schedule. So what's the solution? Well, blue light blocking glasses from GMG Performance can help reduce all of those problems by filtering out blue light, making sure you can sleep a little better, reduce eye strain, particularly for long sessions in front of a screen, and of course they look pretty good too. I feel like I look a little more sophisticated, perhaps even more handsome wearing these frames. And guess what? You can too. In fact, there's a 40% sale right now over the next 48 hours on these glasses and some other styles as well, including some like my normal glasses. So check out that link in the description down there below. Click it, check it out. You'll find some really affordable glasses that can go a long way towards improving your quality of life, particularly as a Hearthstone ladder grinder who needs to play all day, every day to win some ranked games. So that said, let's go ahead and jump into our top 10 list. Starting off with Marrow Slicer for Demon Hunter. And this card's a little bit sort of sleepy under the radar, and maybe it's not as, exciting as something like Blessing of Authority, which didn't make the list, but it's been really core in two different versions of Demon Hunter, both the Soul Fragment, more control or burn-oriented style play, and also just the hyper aggro list as well. Love running Marrow Slicer because it's 8 damage in a single card, and that's fantastic when you're going face. And Soul Fragment Demon Hunter loves going face too, particularly with the Soul Shard Lapidary follow-ups. And they also want to keep the board in check a little bit as well, so this opens up opportunities for Sociologists, etc., making it a really useful tool for Demon Hunters that does exactly what they want to do across multiple styles of play. So since Demon Hunter is a relevant meta deck across 2 archetypes, and Marrow Slicer is really the fundamental card for both of them, I think you have to give it this spot, even if it only barely cracks the top 10. So next up here is Raise Dead, dual class card for Warlock and Priest. A really cheap way to add a ton of resources to your hand, and in particular way that can be manipulated to give you really specific resources. So things like Highlander Priest, for instance, playing out an early Zephrys, knowing that they're going to get it back via Raise Dead. That's amazing to help both make that strong early Zephrys tempo play and then get another Zephrys for later. We've also seen this to activate self-damage effects for things like Flesh Giant in both Dark Lair Warlock, also very occasionally in Priest, but it's popped in. So it even has utility when it's dealing damage. That's sometimes advantageous, not necessarily a downside, and certainly Priest can heal off that damage no problem, while also just adding a ton of resources to hand. So whether you're Warlock and you're cheesing with Dark Lair and Flesh Giant, whether you're Priest just generating all the tools you need, Raise Dead has been really powerful for both of those classes and can feel like a game-defining, game-winning sort of card. Moving on here to Tour Guide. And sadly for this one, I didn't think Tour Guide was going to be very good, guys. I think I gave this like 2 stars. I don't know. Bad stars, whatever the case. I thought it was going to be bad. I just didn't think there'd be enough upside to reducing the cost of your hero power, because you got to draw this card. You can draw other things that can be more impactful, but it turns out there are a couple classes that love the setup of a future discounted hero power so much that it overcomes the low impact of the Tour Guide itself. Namely, we have Hunter with Phase Stalker, where you play this on 1, and you guarantee that Phase Stalker activation on turn 2. Beyond that, we've also had Dark Lair Warlock, which loves setting this up as well, not necessarily on the same curve, but could bank that discount for a Disease Vulture or a Dark Lair for that really powerful play on the follow-up, which is something I really didn't envision for this card. I was thinking like, oh man, the 1/1's not worth it just to get a slightly discounted hero power. It just doesn't make sense. You'll want to do more. But when you can combine it with those hero power synergy effects, Tour Guide becomes really, really nifty. It also has some applications and stuff like Shaman, etc. Turns up it's popping into more lists than I ever expected. It's a pretty impactful card. And it's certainly one of the most played cards in the expansion, particularly because Face Hunter with Face Stalker is running it everywhere. So sure enough, much to my chagrin, much to my sadness, and much to my total incorrectness, Tour Guide is in fact one of the best cards in the set. Moving on here to Lightning Bloom, and I mean, no surprise here. My God, it's like a way better Innervate, and much like old school Innervate, and sure there's some overload there, but who really cares? This card's being used to cheat out things like Guardian Animals, Overgrowths, Ysera's, crazy big plays in Druid with exotic mount sellers or just normal Guardian Animals Druid. It can do pretty much anything and everything because it's free mana. So you end the game with it with Malagos. You cheat out insane 7 mana plays with Guardian Animals, which by the way, we're going to talk about more very, very soon. And you ramp like crazy. It's just a card we all knew was going to be good. It was an instant 5 stars for me. It has lived up to that expectation. It has absolutely fueled Druid's really significant impact on Hearthstone. Shaman's toying around with it. Shaman's not been great yet, but I'm sure it will one day wreak havoc in Shaman as well if it survives in its current state. So I don't think anybody's going to disagree here. Lightning Bloom is just absolutely amazing. So, speaking of the devil, it's Guardian Animals, and some people probably want this card even higher on this list, which you're free to make that argument. Like I said, you could almost argue any of these cards belong in the top spots. Guardian Animals, of course, fueling Guardian Druid, a multitude of varieties there, but they all come back to Guardian Animals plus Twilight Runner, Teacher's Pet, and on occasion, of course, Lake Thresher. And you might say, well, like, why not include those cards in this list? Like, they're just as important as the Guardian Animals. Fair argument. Like I said, there's a lot of great cards that could go here. But ultimately, Guardian Animals is kind of the centerpiece, the thing you want to have in hand. You're not as excited if your Lake Thresher's in hand. You're really excited if your Guardian Animals is. So I think it does take the top spot here. There's precedent and reason for it to be included and not the supporting cards for it. And it turns out summoning all of that crazy mana, giving it immediate impact, powerful cards like Twilight Runner right there with it. It's really, really good. And it's made Druid relevant from day one. It was even better with Kael'thas back then. Even post Kael'thas, this card still survives, unlike something like Survival of the Fittest, which really goes to show you just how powerful this card is. It's an easy choice for this list. Moving on here to Mind Render Ellucia, and I am including the pre-nerf version here. Ellucia is still a great card, still getting played, but she was even better at 2 mana. There's, not a huge difference between those two things, but she lost a few points percentage-wise here and there on her win rate between the nerf, of course, as you'd expect. And at 2 mana, this card was just ridiculous. We have seen Priest fall off a little bit since that nerf, but early in the expansion, both Galakron Priest and Highlander Priest were really, really strong, in part thanks to Ellucia, which did a couple things. Sometimes it could be this finisher, almost like an old school Lotheb, where you empty your hand, you play Ellucia, you've got a big board, your opponent has nothing to do or very limited tools that you left them, so it could help you close out games. Alternatively, it could really disrupt your opponent's stuff. If they're a combo deck, or even if you played it early in the game, you could just like steal their coin and their 1-drop, and it would be good against aggro. So this ultimately flexible tool that's really, really hard to play well, but when you did, it could absolutely steal games and win games from out of nowhere, which made it very powerful enough indeed to get nerfed. So I think Ellucia pretty much had to be included here. All right, moving on to the number 4th spot. It's High Abyss Elora here. Centerpiece, of course, in Libram Paladin, which for a vast majority of the Hearthstone player base has been the number 1 deck in Scholomance Academy, far and away. It's certainly at higher ranks. Libram Paladin falls off a little bit. It's got different variations. But for like 90% of players, this card was the defining centerpiece for the very best deck for a month so far in Scholomance Academy. So, you know, if you're a high legend player, you'd probably be like, well, I don't really think Elora belongs here. But for most of us, mere mortals and lower legend players like myself, diamond, platinum, gold, etc., Elora really does belong on this list. It could probably even be argued for number 1 because she is one of the swingiest and most powerful cards for Libram Paladin lists. Because it turns out cheating out a Libram of Hope on turn 4 with the first day of school is amazing. And I considered a card like First Day of School, which really is one of the best cards in Paladin, but it just doesn't have that swing, that impact, that centerpiece feel of something like Elora. So indeed, she takes the spot here. Now into the top 3, it's Voracious Reader. Another card that's not at all surprising. We saw just how crazy this was compared to previous aggro resource reload cards like Jeeves from back in the day. It just feels like it's strictly and distinctly better for 99% of decks. So much cheaper. And indeed, it turns out aggro decks are running this card everywhere. Most notably is probably Face Hunter, but there are all kinds of really, really fast lists that love this one just because, you know, it's cheap to play. The stats aren't terrible for an aggro list anyway. You're not like over the moon about it, but it's okay to drop a body and then get 3 new cards to go face. It's always like eviscerates and kill commands, right? It's guaranteed. So of course aggro is going to run this card. It's absolutely bonkers amazing. It's made the game really fast in many cases because it is such a good tool. And it does open up some cool lines of play for stuff like even really fast priest decks, which otherwise wouldn't have a reload. Suddenly they do with Voracious Reader, which is kind of scary, but also kind of cool in some ways. But absolutely one of the most played cards of the expansion. Maybe in some ways one of the most frustrating cards in the expansion, I'm sure, for a lot of you. But undeniably, I think, a fantastically powerful utility tool for aggro decks. All right, number 2 is Wand Thief, which might be a little surprising. This one's kind of sleepy compared to some of the other big legendaries and really standout cards. But if you look at the percentages right now, Wand Thief, one of the most popular cards in the expansion because pretty much every mage and every rogue are running it. And that's really no surprise because it's such a cheap, crazy high flexibility card that can bail you out of almost any situation. It's perfect for what mage and rogue like to do. Rogue is cycling tons of stuff and playing cheap cards for combo, getting removal out of this that wouldn't otherwise be possible. Mage is cycling into lots of cheap spells, which is perfect for Wand Thief. So it's just like the dream card. Any class would run this card absolutely all the time if they could. It's just so good for what it is. Great stats, low cost, high impact discover effects on average. It's just fantastic. And that's why it's absolutely everywhere in the meta right now, and Rogue and Mage are as popular as they are. So yes, I could have put like Jandis Barov in this spot. It's a really popular Rogue and Mage card as well. Again, probably deserving to be on this list. Like I said, I cut a ton of great cards, but I thought Wand Thief was just more flexible, more impactful in many ways, just because of the bailouts it can create and how many times it gets bounced and all the shenanigan possibilities. So if you want Barov here, fine. That's another amazing card. But for me, Wand Thief, it just does a little bit more thanks to its low cost. And that's why I gave it the bump. And then finally here, the number 1 spot, it's Secret Passage. And I debated this a ton. There are so many cards. This was far and away the hardest top 10 list I've ever put together because there were like 30 cards, guys. I don't know. But Secret Passage, 2 things here, right? First off, the hype for this one was unbelievable. We all thought this was going to be absolutely bonkers. And it really did kind of live up to that hype because there were like 3 different variations of Rogue that have all been really relevant. You've got more of the weapon Rogue style. You've got more of the fully face stealth aggro Rogue style. And we've also had this kind of tempo-y questing adventure-y Rogue as well. Now, those all, of course, blend together a lot and they share a lot of cards, but they can all exist independently in some ways because of Secret Passage. It's just such an insane hand reload. It lets you find all kinds of damage, all kinds of resources. It got nerfed, of course, because it was so powerful. This is the pre-nerf version at 5 cards instead of 4. And that's really another sign of just how good it was. That even in a pretty balanced meta where things weren't crazy, Blizzard still saw the writing on the wall for this card. They were like, yeah, actually, we better keep that one in check because I feel like it could get a little crazy a little too easily. So yeah, this is my pick for number one. Again, there are like 8 cards here that could have been number one. I'm curious to hear your thoughts. What would your number one card be? What do you think is most impactful? Honestly, I bet you could pick a card not even on this list and make a good argument that it could be number one. Because again, this expansion, the power level is just off the charts. So many cards are amazing. There will probably be more that crop up in future expansions as well that become amazing. So I want all your thoughts, all your takes. There's going to be a lot to argue about in this one. So please do indeed share that in the comments below. And that said, that wraps it up here for this video. The 10 best cards in Scholomance Academy. Hardest video I've ever had to make, but it was a little easier thanks to our sponsor for this one, GMG Performance. First off, thanks for sending me these wicked cool glasses. And if you want to check these out, check the link in the description below. You can get 40% off your order for the next 48 hours. That's absolutely bonkers. You can both support me and get something cool out of it as well. That said, again, thanks much as always for watching. Leave those thoughts down below. And until next time, game on.